Thank you. God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
President-elect Barack Obama at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, 12 days before formally he gets the keys to the White House and becomes President of the United States. And laying out, even though he's not president, the way ahead as he sees it, urging a bipartisan approach to the current economic situation, which he says will get worse before it gets better, which is in a much worse situation, a dire situation than anyone perhaps understands. Let's go to the BBC's Adam Brooks in Washington. Adam, what do you make of that? Only one figure there, a $1,000 tax cut for, as you put it, the middle class. Otherwise, no numbers yet.
No total numbers for how much his stimulus plan would finally cost. I think that's because it's probably incalculable, Nick. But what he has done today is he's put some flesh on the bones of exactly what his stimulus plan would entail. And Americans and the US Congress, crucially, are now going to have to digest that and decide whether or not this is viable and feasible for the US economy. So he's talking about doubling the production of alternative energy produced in the United States in 3 years. He's talking about modernizing 75% of all government buildings in the United States. That's a massive infrastructure renewal project. He's talking about changing the way that America's healthcare system works by making it computerized from top to bottom. Again, massive electronic infrastructure investment. And lots of other things like that without specific price tags attached to them. And Nick, there's something quite interesting going on here, because these things that he's laying out, these projects, are things that Barack Obama wanted to do anyway. And now he's asking America to do it as a way of stimulating the American economy to help it get out of recession and using taxpayer money to finance it. So, clever man that he is, he's turning crisis into opportunity.
He said wait and see did not work, Adam. His swipe at the Bush administration 12 days before he takes over at the White House. What about the bipartisan approach he's appealing for? Night and day, weekends if necessary. Is there that mood on the Hill, understanding that the future of America and the world depends on this?
You make a good point there, Nick. That line, in the few paragraphs into the speech, he says, "We arrived at this point of such dire economic circumstance due to what he calls an era of profound irresponsibility that stretched from corporate boardrooms to the halls of power in Washington, D.C. He is making a very serious indictment of the previous administration and, you could read it, previous Congresses who failed to oversee the way that the economy was being managed. And he is calling for a profound reworking of the political approach to the economy. Now, that is going to irritate people, I think. And he's going to find that that sort of political challenge might well make it harder, not easier, for many in Congress to support him. Nonetheless, he is demanding of the US Congress action, demanding it quickly, and demanding that Republicans as well as Democrats realize the immediacy and urgency, as he sees it, of the situation.
Adam, and just before we go to Jamie, our business presenter, who's sitting alongside me, he likened it to a war. He said it's the same spirit against war, depression and fear itself. Would you say that reflects now a mood in America?
He is trying to raise this situation into the minds of the American people as comparable to the greatest challenges of the 20th century. Depression, war, and then he uses that term fear itself. Of course, a reference to Franklin D. Roosevelt, where he said that America had nothing to fear but fear itself. He is trying to create in the minds of Americans a sense of crisis which calls for an enormous national effort. So you're seeing Obama attempting to frame the debate now and really wake Americans up to what awaits them if, he argues, they don't move fast and pass this stimulus package.
All right, stand by there, Adam. Let's move to Jamie Robertson, my business presenter colleague. Jamie, let's pick up on those particular issues, particularly, once again, those swipes which are brutal about the state of financial regulation of those who've been grabbing cash, grabbing opportunities and bringing the system down.
Yes, I think I'd perhaps even go further, say that not only is he attacking the last administration, but he's also attacking a whole ethos, a whole way of approach of the last, I think it's more than just the last administration, it's going back even further. This idea that the markets know everything, the markets will always eventually get it right.
But he calls it reckless greed and risk-taking, a phrase he's used before.
And he's saying that the markets cannot put this right, it's the government that's going to have to do it. And he's bringing the government in centre stage in order to be able to kick-start the economy over quite a long period. It's more than a kick, it's an almighty push. And he says the markets, ordinary private enterprise, cannot do that. They've got to take a back seat for the moment and then take over and in the long term be the driver of the economy. But he's saying it's a government that's got to do it now. Now, that normally in Congress would go down like a lead balloon. The one thing which, of course, which is going to allow him to get a lot of this through is the tax cut. It's massive, it's huge. A $1,000 tax cut for the average middle-class family is going to make an enormous difference, because that is, as well as providing, obviously, as well as providing government help, he's actually saying to the average American, the average middle-class American, you get on and do something to make this economy work.
Jamie, can this go beyond rhetoric? The full arsenal of tools to get credit flowing again, he said. He talked about reforming a weak and outdated regulatory system. He talked about Wall Street wrongdoers. No longer can we allow the unscrupulous lending and borrowing that leads only to destructive cycles of bubble and bust.
The regulatory system has got... He really sees this as a huge challenge. There's something that's got to be changed enormously. When you look at the kind of regulations which are governing the financial services in the US, there are, I cannot remember the exact sum, but there are regulatory offices in the hundreds that govern the regulatory services. That has got to be changed.
But that can't be changed in a matter of weeks.
No, it can't. He said this is something that's going to take years to do. And some of these regulatory offices go back to the Civil War. It is an ancient piecemeal operation, the whole idea of regulating financial services in the US, and what he's looking to do is to change all that. He talked about falling between the cracks of the regulatory system. That's something he wants to do away with. And, as Adam was saying, he has, because we are in a crisis, he has the opportunity to do this, and something which he wanted to do anyway. If we didn't have a crisis, I don't think he'd have a snowflake's chance in fairness of being able to do it.
And indeed, George W. Bush couldn't do that. Well, let's go back to Adam finally. When you look at the language here and the urgent need, Adam, does he have a fair wind politically behind him to pull all this off? Or immediately, from after midday on the 20th of January, is he going to face hurdle and barrier and obstacle after obstacle after obstacle? Does he have a fair wind behind him from Wall Street, for example?
Obama has enormous political goodwill behind him across America. He's got enormous political capital. It's becoming clear, given the scale of what he's proposing, that he is going to have to start spending that political capital. But, Nick, this is his first test. Even though he's not yet president, this is his first presidential battle, his first big political battle. Passing this stimulus package quickly, getting it through Congress the way that he wants it, would be a sign that perhaps there is a really strong new political consensus at work in Washington, and maybe Obama has got his hands on the levers of power in new, interesting, exciting ways. If this package founders, if it starts getting pulled apart in Congress, if congressmen start standing up and adding amendments to it, putting their own pet projects into it, earmarks as they're called here, if it starts getting pulled apart in committee, if it takes weeks or even months to do, if it founders on the rocks as politics as usual, we will find a new appreciation of Obama as perhaps a less potent, a less powerful politician than he looks right now.
And finally, did he capture a spirit right at the beginning where he seemed to be suggesting if we don't get this right, the United States will not be the primary, premier, the biggest economy in the world? It'll be outflanked, outmaneuvered by others, and will fall by the wayside?
He's speaking to an underlying fear that has sort of been shot through American society for the last year and more. And look where he says in that speech, we're going to expand massively investment in technology and learning so that our children can compete with Who? He says the school children in Beijing. He raises the prospect of China, of emergent new economic powers, as challenging America for a share of global prosperity. Yes, it does speak to broader American fears that this moment that we're in may signal the end of American economic primacy, and he's trying to warn Americans that only with action can that fate be averted.
Thanks, Adam, for joining us live from Washington, D.C., close to where President-elect Barack Obama has really started his presidency 12 days before he formally walks into the Oval Office after the inauguration up on Capitol Hill. There he is. He's finally put on the record his plan for recovery in America. He calls it recovery and reinvestment. That's his plan. You've heard the details. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks and the obstacles he faces there.